Community is everything. We're proud to support ours. Through partnerships with fellow community leaders and organizations, we're helping our neighbors access essential resources and services so we can all thrive. Learn more at bofA.com/community.
Well, good morning.
Good morning again.
Good morning again, John. We've talked a lot this week about your work on the Growth Council, and you surprised me a little bit by saying, you co-chaired this effort, and your assignment, in part at least, was to come up with ways of growing Michigan's population, and you say not to expect that.
I did, and that surprised me too. Spent a lot of time with the demographers, and almost to a T, they went through a rather elaborate explanation of exactly how populations grow. And there are 4 factors that Michigan is facing that are all in the negative. One is birth rates. Young people under 35 aren't having as many kids, they're not getting married as quickly as my generation did. And on top of it, you saw Sandy give you data that there are fewer of them in terms of the percentage of the population. Number 2, our death rate is much higher, not because people are living shorter lives, they're living longer lives, but we have a cohort of over 65 that's twice as large today as it was 30 years ago. So the difference between those two is striking. More people are dying than are getting birthed here in Michigan. Third is international immigration. We're no longer a destination state. I won't go into all the details why. We still have some immigrants coming, but not nearly what we experienced 40, 50 years ago. And then finally, migration, the interchange between states here in the state. We're failing there too. Our best and brightest are wanting to live in places like Chicago, New York, San Francisco. So you add all of that up together, and they then bring the China factor in, and not that China has anything to do with it, but they're suffering the same thing. And there's going to be a long time before we can reverse those tendencies. And the demographers have shown that, yes, we'll have some slight 30, 40,000 increases. That's insufficient to do what we wanted to do. And so by 2050, we'll be lucky to be the same size state as we are today. And there's just enormous implications as a result of that. The tax base can't grow. Our federal influence will wane. And just the general overall perception of Michigan will be negative. So that's the bad news. The good news is that what takes place to grow population over 100 years, and all of the things in the report are exactly what has to happen for us to increase the prosperity of the state. So let's not focus on population growth. It's an outcome of what we have to do to increase our prosperity. It's only one of many outcomes, and we should focus more on our per capita income, how we could, for 70 years, see this thing slip from being one of the top states in the country, 117% of average, to now we're in the mid-80s. It's happened day, week, month, year after year after year. Nobody noticed it except the UAW noticed it this last summer, and they say, my gosh, we've gotten no increases in our pay over the last 7 or 8 years. And of course, there's a big strike and a lot of strife over it. We've got to do a much better job of increasing the productivity of the state.
So John, when my parents came here from the South many decades ago, and others flocked to Michigan during that period of its explosive growth, they were looking for one thing, a job that paid better than the ones they were leaving behind. What's happened here over the last several decades that has put us so far behind?
There's several things. One is the fact that the high-paying auto jobs and manufacturing jobs have migrated to the South. And there's no question that study after study shows that those high-paying, there are low-paying manufacturing jobs, but they certainly aren't in the auto business in the big 3. Many of those jobs have migrated to the South. And we're replacing those with healthcare and service jobs, and they pay 80% of what you could earn in the plant. That's number one. Number 2, we've been slow to adopt innovation and entrepreneurship as a state. Our big companies have sort of driven the economy here, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, and we aren't quite as agile and entrepreneurial as places like Silicon Valley and Route 123 in Boston. And so the jobs that are here in this state are not the high-paying desirable jobs that our young people want. They have to go out of the state to find them. But I argue that there is plenty of them here. We are the innovation center. We have 3 things going on right now. Henry Ford Hospital's huge $5 billion expansion. The U of M hub, innovation hub in downtown Detroit. Ford Motor Company's new train station and what they're trying to accomplish there. There are these pockets that recognize that we have, and then of course there's Dan Gilbert's entire effort, which probably we should talk more about, but we have these ingredients to begin to turn the state around, and what we need to do is to come together, Republicans and Democrats, blacks and whites, suburbanites and city dwellers, and put all these other issues out on the extremities and focus on prosperity for the state of Michigan and not let ourselves get dragged into many of these social arguments that we're currently having.
And John, you said we should change the conversation. Instead of talking about population growth, we should start talking about productivity growth.
Exactly.
And how do we grow productivity in this state?
Well, the number one aspect of growing productivity is innovation, small, medium, and large. Every day, every person has to go to work with the idea that how do I do my job a little bit better, and how do I bring added value to my company and ultimately to my customer. That's a mindset that takes a smart person to do that. And we've got to begin training these kids at pre-K. If you were to look at my household, I have 11 grandkids. They all have iPads at 3 years old. They're all being taught how to write software at a very early age. We're preparing, but every child should have that kind of an opportunity to be able to reach the 21st century with the skill set that's necessary, instead of making 85% of national average, to make 120% of national average in terms of income. And as you know, yesterday we talked about this. If we were to have just kept our population at 4%, which would today make Michigan 12,500,000 citizens, our tax base would have grown by almost $4 billion without raising taxes for anybody.
So, you know, there's been a lot of pushback on this report, as Shirley talked about in her discussion with Lloyd. A lot of folks think this is a backdoor route to more taxes in the state, or at the very least that it will demand a lot more taxes to implement. What's your answer to that?
I think this report is a call for accountability. And I don't predict what taxes should be, but I think that the state needs to go through 4 levels of inspection, reflection, in terms of how does the state raise its revenue and what does it do with the revenue that it raises. So today our overall budget's $80 billion. $30 billion comes from the federal government. $50 billion is locally raised, state of Michigan raised. We need to do a zero-based budgeting on everything that the state spends. We have to claw that thing apart. We need to look at, are we getting the kind of return on this kind of money? Other states have done this, and they have found 10% waste, fraud, and programs that aren't giving a return. I can't believe, being a businessman and the size of my company, that the state can't find 5 to 10% waste in the government today. I just don't believe it. And I think that the politicians are afraid to do it because of all the special interests. And so this is the problem in Michigan. Special interest has taken the day over the general public and the goodwill of the general public. That's number one. Number two, that $30 billion federal largesse that we get, are we getting all that we deserve? Are we efficient enough to at least get the stuff that's programmed for us? I remember during Coleman Young's administration, the city of Detroit lost millions of dollars of HUD grants because they just didn't have the capacity to go out and to collect it or to apply for it. We need to do a much better job. 3, one of the most surprising things to me during the 6 months was philanthropy and how they called us up and said, what can we do to help? They have huge budgets. Is their spending appropriate today too? And I took from their offer that they are standing willing and able to come forward and to help in a very big way. I think you also have to look at business in that same respect. And then finally, If you want to talk about taxes, I wouldn't even begin to talk about new taxes until I understood fully whether the current tax structure that was designed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is appropriate for the 21st century. And all those people who say that, oh, it's all just a ruse for tax increase, they're afraid to go down that pathway. That's an easy way to throw a red herring into the mix and to distract everybody in the press into all it's about new taxes. It isn't about new taxes. It's about the fact that the state of Michigan is broken.
Okay, John, you build plants and other facilities all over the country, all over the world. What do people say in other places about Michigan and the obstacles to coming here to build the sort of facilities you're building elsewhere?
I've talked about this since 2007. We lack the cohesive society that big investors need in order to take a risk and come to a particular state. And by the way, there's no state that's perfect. But in our state, when Volkswagen was going to have their first plant, we were very, very close. Governor Granholm put a nice package on the table, and we lost to Tennessee. Walbridge built it. I went over to Germany. I asked the leadership of Volkswagen, why Tennessee? And they said 6 reasons, all underscored by the fact that you lack cohesion as a state. And so, oh my gosh, I'm an engineer. Cohesion is all chemical molecules sticking together. But they meant it, the Germans meant in the way of humans sticking together. They said, you have no political cohesion. Democrats and Republicans fight all the time. You have no racial cohesion. You've had 2 big riots and you still haven't solved the racial issues that have faced Michigan. And you have this thing called 8 Mile, which is equivalent of the Green Line in Beirut. You have no labor management cohesion. And we saw that and how the last strikes and UAW negotiations went on. This song gets played throughout the whole world. And they concluded no geographic cohesion. And you don't even have any real county-city cohesion. That was back when Mayor Young and Brooks Patterson, had the floor. And they took all this stuff and they said, we can't invest $4 billion in your state. We don't know if you'll be there for us if the economy changes or the world environment changes. We need somebody that we see as a strategic partner. Michigan doesn't present itself today as a strategic partner. Well, that's why these things are not getting built here.
In Business Leaders' last report, they talked about continuity, that every time the political leadership changes in Lansing, every time the balance of powers changes, new policies come in place.
They call that the Michigan 180, and it's not the auto race out in Jackson. It's the fact that, you're right, every 4 years, every 8 years, we completely reverse everything. There's no accountability, not accountability, there's no predictability. There's no predictability as to what Michigan will be like 4 or 5 years from now.
And so this report is, as you said, this is a long game, 25, 30 years out before the benefits start really showing up. Can we do that here with the sort of back and forth changes of power and changes of objectives and goals that we've seen here over the last 30, 40 years?
I believe we can. I believe we have the assets. We have smart people. By the way, nobody's ever said Michigan was lazy. We have very, very hardworking people. We have the desire to do that. Now we need the drive. And this is where all of these come into focus. If our legislators and our governor won't do what we want, then we need to get those who will. And we need to make this conversation the top conversation in this year's political election. And let's see where the chips fall. Let's see if the legislators who are running for office are willing to say, I'm in agreement with this. So far, we haven't had it. Even this commission. There are 2 seats that were filled by Republican legislators, 1 senator, one representative. They didn't come to the meetings. 1 voted no, 1 never even showed up, never even got approved. The Republican side of this equation didn't want anything to do with this because it's in an election year and they needed to make hay for why we needed to have a wholesale change. And by the way, they might be right. They might have a wholesale change and we can change again and it will not be to the betterment of the state of Michigan. So we need Republicans, we need Democrats, we need blacks, we need whites, we need minorities, we need everybody. And the question will be after this session this day, whether everybody in this room agrees that we need to do something about this now, because here's why. The world is changing so quickly. Technology is so complex. Innovation is a magic elixir of how it happens. And the further behind we get, it will be almost impossible at some point to catch up.
John, you said that the most important piece of this plan is education. You've been involved in education reform efforts for a long time. A lot of folks in this room have seen 15, 20 of these fixed education proposals come and go. We've all got a bookshelf full of them in our offices. What do we have to do this time to make sure it happens?
There needs to be structural change. Structurally, we are not organized in a way to have a good result. We have too many school districts. Florida has 83. We have 800. How much money are we wasting in administrative overheads that could go into the classroom? There's calculations out there. $1,000 per kid per year? It's an enormous drag. Number two, even Lansing's not efficient. We've got a board of education and a general superintendent that's different from the governor. This report's made a recommendation. We need to consolidate that. We need more accountability. But we also need at the same time make sure that more money goes into the classroom. Not enough money is going in the classroom. If you were to compare our classroom spend to Tennessee and Massachusetts, it's pitiful. And so those are the three big things that have to happen.
Well, John, would you support getting rid of the State Education Board, and would you help with a ballot drive to do that?
I would be supportive of a top-notch commission being put into place to come back with a recommendation this year of how the top of the state should be organized. I am not an education expert. I don't know if the governor should have 100% of the responsibility or whether there should be some form of a board that reports to the governor. I'm not smart enough to know what the actual solution is. I know that you can't have two presidents running the same company.
Obviously. Now, John, when you take a look at going out from here, a lot of moving parts here. A lot of things have to be implemented. A lot of change has to be made. You expressed some skepticism on the political side. Do you believe the business community will get behind this and do what they can to make it happen?
I know that the two organizations that I am heavily involved in, Business Leaders for Michigan and the Detroit Regional Chambers, are all in to push this agenda for 2024. Whether we can co-opt other labor organizations, other civic organizations, other political parties, I don't know yet. We're going to see. I think the governor deserves the opportunity, since it's her commission. She has a report. She has a State of the State message coming out in February, to first give her the first opportunity to tell us what she's going to do. And I'm hoping she'll be robust. She doesn't have another election. And I'm hopeful, and I won't say confident, but I'm hopeful that she's going to look at this and say, this is the moment. Save for that. And if it doesn't happen, then we're going to have to sit back and say, okay, what can we do? And we'll have to pressure Lansing. You know, in the school situation in 2014, we marched on. I marched. I never thought it would be effective. I marched on Lansing and said, you need to do something about the Detroit public school systems. It's bankrupt. And after a couple of marches and filling all of these legislators' rooms with people demanding action, action happened. We have to demand action. We need to hold them accountable for no action.
If there's not immediate action, if we wait this election year out, what's the risk? Is this
We're going to fall further behind. We don't have time to talk about the electric car business, but I'm going to go over for at least 1 minute. EV is so necessary to the national security of the United States of America. And here's the reason why. There are 6 technologies that we are falling further and further behind the Chinese. 1 is battery chemistry. 2 is chips and processors. 3 is cybersecurity. 4 is lightweight materials, okay? All of those things have major implications. I missed the big one. AI and autonomous driving. All these things have major implications as it pertains to the national security of our country, because they're all applicable to the military, to intelligence collecting, to intelligence analysis. We need those things, and if we just sort of, and Michigan has all that stuff. This is all occurring at the GM Tech Center, at the Ford Tech Center, the Chrysler Tech Center. I don't know why we're not promoting that more, because we have software engineers and technicians and all of this kind of stuff. We're missing the boat on this, and we're going to wake up 20 or 30 years from now and say, oh my gosh, we let all this stuff slip right through our fingers.
John Rakolta, thank you. Appreciate
You're welcome.
your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Community is everything. We're proud to support ours. Through partnerships with fellow community leaders and organizations, we're helping our neighbors access essential resources and services so we can all thrive. Learn more at bofA.com/community.